The scent of antiseptic and despair was a permanent stain in the air of my hospital room. At 50 years old, Lena Petrova, was being eaten from the inside by a disease I could no longer afford to fight. The doctors spoke in hushed, pitying tones about aggressive treatment options, their eyes sliding away from mine when I mentioned the cost. That was what finally forced me to look. Our shared passbook, the one that should have held the fruits of a lifetime of labor, was gone from its usual hiding place. A cold dread, sharper than any cancer pain, began to creep through my veins. With trembling hands, I used the hospital phone to call the bank. The manager's voice was laced with a sympathy that felt like a physical blow. Mrs. Petrova, for the last 12 years, a substantial annual transfer has been made from the joint account to a private one under the name Sofia Ivanova. The name was a ghost from a past I'd foolishly believed was buried. She was his first love, the one who got away, the wistful story he'd told me early on, framed as a youthful mistake. Now it was a noose around my neck. I hung up, the plastic receiver slick in my sweaty palm. The house. We still had the house, the first property we'd bought together. I would mortgage it, use the money to live, to fight. I called our lawyer, my voice a frantic, reedy thing. Lena, he said, his tone heavy with an apology he hadn't yet spoken. The deed was transferred to Sofia Ivanova's name 6 months ago. I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew. The world tilted on its axis. I stumbled from my bed, the 4-pole clattering beside me, and retched into a basin. There was nothing in my stomach but bile and betrayal. That evening I confronted Alexei. He stood by the window of my hospital room, silhouetted against the dying sun, the man I had loved with a ferocity that now felt like a sickness. The money, Alexei? The house? Sofia? The words were torn from me, ragged and raw. He didn't even flinch. He turned, his face a mask of calm indifference. Lena, I already married you. What more do you want? He shook his head, a faint sigh of disappointment escaping his lips. You're just too greedy. I stared at him, this stranger I had shared a bed and a life with for decades. This was the man I had poured my entire savings into, helping him build his first business from the ground up. This was the man for whom I had foregone children because he claimed they would be a burden. And all the while he had been using my money, our money, to build a secret life, a secret family with another woman. I gave a bitter, choked sound that was supposed to be a laugh. It was the last sound I made before the darkness at the edges of my vision swallowed me whole. I died there in that sterile room, full of a resentment so profound I felt it would poison my very soul. Then I opened my eyes. Sunlight, bright and unfiltered, streamed through a familiar window. The air smelled of fresh linen and dust, not death. I was standing in my old bedroom in the village, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from sickness, but from disorienting, terrifying life. In my hand was a small, weighty box. I opened it. Nestled inside was a gold-plated Zenith fountain pen, a luxury item that had cost me a small fortune. A memory, sharp and clear, sliced through my confusion. This was the day. The day I was going to give it to Alexei, hoping this extravagant gift would finally make him see me as more than just the persistent village girl who trailed after him. A hard shove from behind sent me stumbling. Alexei's voice, younger, laced with a contempt I now recognized, rang in my ears. Lena, I told you I don't like you. Stop giving me things. I don't want people to misunderstand our relationship. He was in his 20s, dressed in faded, patched clothes that were a far cry from the tailored suits of my memory. You trail after me all day. Don't you even know what modesty and self-respect are? I studied him, truly seeing him for the first time. The shabby clothes, the entitled set of his jaw, the way his eyes flickered to the pen in my hand with a gleam of desire he tried to mask with annoyance. He was a leech, a social climber. And I had been his willing host. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, this one genuine and laced with a lifetime of hindsight. I had been so blind. Seeing my silence, his face twisted with impatience. Fine, he said with a long-suffering sigh. I'll reluctantly accept this gift. I'll forgive you this time, but don't bother me again. Don't you get it? He reached out, his fingers poised to take the box. Just before he could touch it, I whipped my hand back and slipped the pen into the pocket of my dress. His hand hung in the air, suspended in shock. His mouth opened and closed. You're playing hard to get, he muttered almost to himself. I met his gaze, my own steady and cold. You're overthinking it. I just realized I don't like you anymore. Don't worry, I won't bother you again. I turned to leave. The world felt sharper, the colors more vivid. I was free. Lena, wait. Panic edged his voice. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. His eyes darted again to my pocket. His tone softened, becoming wheedling. Lena, I was too harsh earlier. That was my fault. It's just that we haven't known each other long and you keep following me every day. It doesn't look good. Just then, a figure appeared at the end of the dirt path. Sivia. She was as soft and delicate as I remembered, a city flower wilting in the village sun. Alexei, she called, her voice sweet. The team leader has been looking for you everywhere. Alexei startled as if electrocuted. He dropped my arm and stepped back so quickly he almost tripped. He turned to her and I saw the tips of his ears turn red. Sophia, it's Lena. He keeps forcing gifts on me. I've rejected her so many times, but she's been clinging to me these days and I can't get rid of her. Sophia glided over, a gentle smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her calculating eyes. Alexei, you're a man. You don't understand girls. Let me talk to Lena. The team leader needs you urgently. You should go. Alexei nodded, shot me a warning glare that now held no power over me and hurried away. Sophia turned her saccharine smile on me. Lena, Alexei will definitely go back to the city one day. He won't stay here for you. Don't waste your time on him. In my past life I had missed the subtext, thinking she was kindly advising me. Now I heard the smug possessiveness loud and clear. I knew Alexei often resold the gifts I gave him to buy things for her, and she, in turn, mistakenly believed he came from a wealthy family. Don't worry, I said, my voice flat. I don't like him. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked away, the weight of the Zenith pen in my pocket feeling less like a burden and more like my first piece of reclaimed treasure. The game had changed. This time I knew the rules. I returned to the textile factory where I worked, the rhythmic clatter of the looms a comforting, familiar sound. I changed into my work clothes, the coarse fabric a stark reminder of the simple, hard life I had led. But as I worked, my mind was a whirlwind of plans and bitter realizations. When my shift ended, I went to my locker, a sudden, nagging worry taking root. I reached into the pocket of my work coat. The pen was gone. My heart gave a single hard thud. I began searching frantically, pulling out my spare clothes, my lunch pail, my hands trembling. My coworker, Anya, a kind, matronly woman, noticed my distress. Lena? What's wrong? I penned the nice one. It's gone from my locker. Anya's face softened with sympathy. Oh, that young man you like, Alexei, he came by to see you this afternoon. You were on the other side of the factory. A few times when you were too busy, I let him take little gifts from your locker. I thought it was sweet. She beamed, completely unaware of the knife she was twisting in my gut. I froze. The audacity of him. He hadn't just accepted my gifts. He had helped himself to them. Rage, cold and clear, washed over me. I would not be his victim again. I thanked Anya and marched out of the factory, my steps purposeful. I didn't go to his residence first. I went to the village administration office and found two of the local cadres. Comrades, I said, my voice shaking with a feigned distress that wasn't entirely fake. I need your help. My Zenith fountain pen, a valuable heirloom from my parents, has been stolen from my locker at the factory. I have reason to believe Alexei Volkov has taken it. Their eyes widened. Theft was a serious accusation. Without hesitation they followed me to the educated youth quarters. We found Alexei sitting at his rickety desk, carefully practicing his calligraphy. With my pen. Alexei, one of the cadres said, his voice stern. We received a report that you stole Lena's pen. Alexei looked up, his face a perfect mask of shock and indignation. Stole it? I didn't steal it. She insisted on giving it to me. He turned a wounded gaze toward me. Lena, why would you lie like this? I let my eyes move from the pen still in his hand to his face. I kept my voice calm, lethally so. When did I ever give it to you? That pen was in the pocket of my work coat in my locked locker. You took it without my permission. He hesitated, his brow furrowing in a show of frustration. So what if I rejected your advances? Do you have to slander me like this? Don't let love turn into hate. I can't afford that kind of attention. His shamelessness was breathtaking. The village officials looked at me uncertainly. Lena, one said gently, everyone in the village knows you like Alexei. Could it be a misunderstanding? Yes, I admitted, looking each of them in the eye. I liked him. Everyone knew. But that doesn't give him the right to steal from me. I fixed my cold stare back on Alexei. Alexei, what exactly is our relationship? Without thinking, he blurted out the line he'd used so many times. Lena, I told you I don't like you. I laughed, a sharp, scornful sound. If you don't like me, then why did you accept every single gift I gave you? Why are you using my pen right now? You always pretended you had no choice, yet you used every item so conveniently. As I spoke, I stepped forward and snatched the pen from his hand. He watched, stunned, as I tucked it safely back into my dress. Since you've rejected me so firmly, I continued, my voice rising, then return everything I ever gave you. Every last item. That way no one can ever say you, Alexei Volkov, were living off a woman. His face went pale, then flushed a deep, mortified red. He could only watch, helpless, as I began to ransack his room. I pulled out the leather wallet, the wool scarf, the tin of expensive tea, the new boots. The pile grew so large I couldn't carry it all, and one of the cadres, his lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval at Alexei, had to help me haul everything out. Alexei's family was poor. The small comforts he enjoyed in the village, the warm clothes, the good leather, the treats, came almost entirely from me. Without my support, he was just another shabby young man from the city, sent to the countryside to labor. As I stepped out of his doorway, the small crowd that had gathered watching in silent judgment, I suddenly turned back. A flicker of hope crossed Alexei's face. He tried to suppress it, putting on a false, weary sigh. Lena, why go to all this trouble? Even if I reject you now, we can still be friends. I walked right past him, went to his desk and grabbed the sturdy wooden chair. Your chair broke last month, I said. So you took mine from my house. It's time you gave it back. Without another word, I carried the chair out, adding it to the pile of my reclaimed life, and left him standing in his near-empty room. Later, I went to the nearby town and sold all the gifts. Combined with the money my parents had left me before they passed, a nest egg of 1,000 yuan I had been saving for a future that never came, I had a substantial sum. In my past life, I had poured this very money into Alexei's hands. This time it was my capital, my freedom. I knew the coming decades would bring tremendous change. I had lived through it once, watching from the sidelines as Alexei took the credit for our shared success. This time I would seize the opportunity for myself. I would stay far away from Alexei and Sophia, build my own career and achieve a freedom he could never take from me. The next morning, I handed in my resignation at the factory. I was going to the city to start a business. Our village was remote. The bus to the city only ran on weekends. I had to wait 3 more days. On Wednesday night, the villagers gathered in the square for the weekly outdoor movie. I found a spot and tried to lose myself in the film, but at some point Alexei slipped into the seat beside me. He pressed a piece of hard candy into my palm. Still sulking, he said, his tone condescending. How about this? If you buy me a Volga bicycle, I'll consider being with you. A Volga bicycle cost nearly 200 yuan. He was so arrogantly sure of my devotion he thought my rejection was just a tantrum, a play for attention. He believed he could name his price and I would pay it. In my past life I had. And the seat on that bicycle was never for me. It was always reserved for Sophia. Remembering that, I suddenly raised my voice, loud enough to be heard over the movie. Comrade Volkov, I'm really not interested in you. Stop pestering me. If you want a bicycle so badly, earn the money yourself through your own labor instead of scheming after a girl's money. My words cut through the cinematic dialogue. Heads turned. Alexei froze, his face flushing a deep, humiliated red. The next moment he spotted Sophia in the crowd. He scrambled to save face. Lena, stop talking nonsense, he loudly snapped. You're the one who's been chasing me. Who said anything about you buying me a bicycle? You misheard. I said I was buying one myself and that you weren't allowed to ride it. I laughed, a clear mocking sound. Then I'll look forward to seeing this bicycle of yours. Around us, whispers rose. A Volga bicycle? Alexei must have some means. I heard his city family is wealthy. With his face turning darker and darker, I stood up and left the square, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. The first blows had been struck. My new life was beginning. The bus ride to the city was a 6-hour jolting pilgrimage, each bump and sway carrying me further from my old life. I spent the journey pressed against the grimy window, watching the dense green countryside slowly give way to the sprawling dusty outskirts of urbanity. My nose stung and the tears I had held back for a lifetime finally fell, not of sadness but of catharsis. With each passing kilometer, I felt the ghost of my former self, the gullible love-starved Lena, dissipate like mist. I was shedding a skin. The city center was a cacophony of construction, bicycle bells, and the vibrant, chaotic energy of a nation on the cusp of change. In my previous life I had arrived here with Alexei, wide-eyed and trusting, pouring my inheritance into his ambitions. We had started with a tiny clothing store. I had been the one haggling at the port, hauling heavy bolts of fabric, charming customers while he managed the books, a euphemism I now knew for siphoning money to Sophia. This time the knowledge was my greatest asset. I went straight to the busiest pedestrian street, a bustling artery of commerce where young people in increasingly fashionable clothes browsed and shopped. I found a small, slightly dilapidated shop for rent, its windows grimy but its location perfect. Using a fraction of my savings I secured the lease and did a simple clean renovation. White walls, good lighting and a long polished wooden rail for the clothes. Then came the real work. I took the train to the port, a grueling day-long journey packed with merchants and their wares. The air was thick with salt and the shouts of vendors. I moved through the crowded warehouses with a purpose I'd never possessed before, my eyes scanning for quality and style. I bought only women's clothing. I remembered the old adage from my last life. No matter the era, a woman's desire to feel beautiful is a constant, and her money is the easiest to earn. My innovation was in the presentation. Instead of selling separate pieces, I curated complete outfits, pairing blouses with skirts, dresses with matching belts and scarves. I named the store Lena's Look. On opening day I held my breath as the first customers trickled in. Their eyes lit up. The convenience of a pre-styled ensemble, the assurance that they would look put together was a novelty. Word spread. By afternoon the shop was a whirlwind of excited women, their arms laden with clothes, their chatter a symphony of success. The threshold wasn't literally broken but it felt like it. I was overwhelmed. Within a week I hired a helper, a shy but sharp-eyed local girl named Kira. Twice a month I resumed my exhausting trips to the port, returning with sacks of new stock that Kira and I would price and display. The work was back-breaking, the days long, but the feeling at the end of the day sitting on the floor of the back room and counting the day's earnings was intoxicating. This money was mine. Earned by my sweat, my vision, my two hands. In my last life, I had only ever seen the profits through Alexei's condescending summaries. Now I felt the weight of every bill, the promise in every coin. I laughed out loud sometimes, the sound echoing in my small apartment above the shop. This was power. The peace lasted 2 months. I returned from a particularly successful stock-buying trip, my muscles aching from hauling heavy bags from the station, to find Kira with a long face. "Lena," she said, wringing her hands. "A new store opened. Right across the street. It's called Sophia's Style." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I walked to the doorway and looked out. There they were. Alexei was arranging a display in the window, while Sophia stood at the counter, preening. Their prices, Kira whispered, were half of mine. My regular customers were crossing the street, lured by the bargain. Taking a deep breath, I crossed the road and stepped into their shop. The bell above the door jingled. Alexei turned and our eyes met. His expression shifted from surprise to a slow, smug recognition. He knew. He sauntered over, lowering his voice so Sophia, who was busy with a customer, couldn't hear. "Lena," he smirked, the knowing look in his eyes confirming my darkest suspicion. "You've been reborn too, haven't you?" I froze, a chill creeping up my spine, rooting me to the spot. He saw my reaction and nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. "I had a dream. A long, detailed dream. I dreamed we got married, started a business together. Now that I see you here doing exactly what we did, I'm sure it was all real." He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "In my last life I let Sophia down. Heaven gave me this chance to start over so I could correct my mistake. That's why in this life I can't marry you. Lena, you already had me for a lifetime. Now it's Sophia's turn." His shamelessness, his staggering lack of self-awareness, was so profound it broke the spell of my fear. A short, sharp laugh escaped me. Do you think you're some great prize that everyone's fighting over? In my last life you ruined me. Do you think I'd still want to marry you again? In reality, all he'd done in that life was get a marriage certificate with me. The woman who truly lived with him, who bore his child, was Sophia. I had kept watch over an empty house for 30 years while he played house with her. Alexei scowled, his brows furrowing. So you're just laying it all out now. Fine, then don't harbor any more thoughts about me. Before I could retort, Sophia swept over, pushing past a customer to cling possessively to Alexei's arm. Our Alexei really has a talent for business, she beamed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. In just 3 days we've already made several hundred. Soon we'll be a 10,000 yuan household. Alexei gazed at her adoringly. It's thanks to you, Sophia. You're amazing at finding these cheap, pretty clothes. We're going to dominate this whole street. Cheap and pretty. The words echoed in my mind. I turned my head to really look at their merchandise, but Sophia immediately blocked my view with her body. Lena, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Business should be fair competition. Don't think about stealing our ideas. If your store isn't doing well, maybe you should look at yourself instead. I gave her a long, deep look, then turned and walked away without a word. I didn't need to steal their ideas. I knew their secret. The goods I got from the port were quality items at rock-bottom prices. For their prices to be half of mine, the quality had to be abysmal. I asked the owner of the noodle shop next to me for a favor. Uncle Feng, could you buy a piece from Sophia's style and bring it back for me? When Kira brought me the purchased blouse, I laid it next to the identical style we sold. The difference was glaring. Theirs was made of thin, cheap polyester with a strong chemical odor. The stitching was sloppy and uneven with loose threads everywhere. A memory, sharp and clear, surfaced. In my last life, an illegal factory inland had churned out these shoddy imitations. Their prices were irresistibly low, and many shopkeepers tempted by the higher margins had switched to them. I, too, had been tempted, but one feel of the coarse fabric had convinced me otherwise. Later, the factory owners fled in the night, leaving a trail of bankrupt merchants and furious customers in their wake. Alexei, who only ever cared about the money coming in and never about the quality of the goods, had no memory of this collapse. He thought he could simply replicate the surface-level success of our past life, not understanding that it was my relentless attention to quality and detail that had built our reputation. Knowing their boutique was a house of cards waiting for a strong wind, I felt a thrill of grim anticipation. In my past life they had joined hands to steal my life, my assets, and leave me to die. This time I would watch as the consequences of their own greed and incompetence buried them. The collapse came even faster than I had anticipated. 3 days later, I was arranging a new display of silk scarves when a commotion erupted from across the street. A crowd was gathering outside Sophia's style, their voices raised in anger. Kira ran back in, her eyes wide. Lena, something's happened. There's a fight over there. It sounds like someone got hurt. Who died? The thought, dark and unbidden, leaped into my mind with a surge of grim hope. If it were Alexei or Sophia, I would have celebrated for 3 days straight. I walked to my doorway, crossing my arms as I watched the scene unfold. To my disappointment, no one had died. Alexei was standing in the doorway, a trickle of blood running from a split on his forehead where a disgruntled customer had apparently struck him with a rolled-up garment. He was trying to shield a weeping Sophia, who was squatting on the floor, frantically gathering clothes that had been thrown about in the melee. Swindlers! A woman shrieked, waving a blouse that had ripped at the seam after a single wash. This is garbage. I want my money back. The chorus of agreement was deafening. I saw Alexei's face, pale beneath the blood, his eyes wide with a panic I recognized. The panic of a man who sees his carefully constructed illusion crumbling to dust. Later that evening, after the crowd had been dispersed with promises of refunds that I knew they could not afford, I saw Alexei through their shop window. His head was wrapped in a crude bandage and he was sitting at their counter, sighing as he flipped through an account book. Sophia was beside him, her face puffy and pale. Sophia, I heard him say, his voice strained, where did you even get this stock? With quality like this, there's no way we can sell it. We still have 800 yuan worth in storage. Go return it. Sophia's hands, which were nervously twisting a scrap of fabric, stilled. She lifted her face, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. Alexei, while you were at the clinic, I went to look for that factory. They've already skipped town. They were swindlers. I can't find them anymore. Alexei shot to his feet, yanking her up roughly. His face turned dark with a rage I had only ever seen directed at me in our past life. Didn't you say that factory was reliable? You blew all our money on their goods. Tomorrow is repayment day for the loan, and the little profit we just earned is gone. What do you expect me to use to pay it back? It was the first time I had ever seen him truly lose his temper with her. But Sophia wasn't me. She wasn't cowed by his anger. She tore his hand from her arm, planted her fists on her hips and shouted back, her voice shrill. Don't you dump all the blame on me. Didn't I ask your opinion before I bought the stock? My parents had already arranged a job for me at a state-owned factory, but you insisted on dragging me into this business. You promised we'd become a 10,000 yuan household in a year. If you hadn't been so bent on copying Lena and opening a clothing store, would any of this have happened? Now look, it's all ruined. Alexei clenched his fists, his chest heaving. I could see the war on his face, the desire to strike her warring with the desperate need to keep her, his last remaining asset. After a long, tense moment, he forced himself to calm down. He pulled her into his arms, his movements stiff, and began to coax her in a soft, wheedling tone I knew all too well. All right. I was too impatient and said the wrong thing. Don't be angry. It's my fault. He stroked her hair. But tomorrow that loan still has to be repaid. Didn't you say your parents got you an introduction letter to that state-owned factory? His voice dropped to a persuasive whisper. Let's sell that letter for cash, use the money to pay back the loan, and then we can buy new, better stock. A fresh start. Sophia pushed him away, her eyes filled with a new, sharp suspicion. Alexei, wait a minute. Didn't you say your family had money to support your business? The loan was one thing, but why are you asking me to sell my future for money now? Alexei froze for a second, and I saw the frantic calculations behind his eyes. Then he forced out the excuse, the same one he'd likely used on her for years. This is my parents' way of testing me, Sophia. If I can make it on my own, they'll let me inherit the family business. This is the final hurdle. In my last life, Sophia had believed these lies without question because the money I earned had been the proof. Now the proof was a pile of unsellable rags and a pressing debt. I saw the doubt solidify on her face. She loved the idea of money, but she loved herself more. In the end, she refused. I slipped away from my eavesdropping spot before they noticed me, a small, cold smile on my lips. The house of cards had not just fallen, it had collapsed in on itself. Soon after, Sophia's style shut its doors for good. My store's business, after a brief dip, came roaring back. Customers who had been burned by their shoddy quality returned to me, their loyalty cemented. I was no longer just a shopkeeper. I was a purveyor of quality. A week later, as I hurried to the train station for my regular trip to the port, I saw them. Alexei and Sophia, looking haggard and desperate, were loitering near the entrance. The moment they spotted me, their eyes locked on and they began to follow me like shadows. The station was packed, a heaving mass of humanity. Using my knowledge of the crowd, I ducked and weaved, slipping through narrow gaps between passengers, and managed to lose them momentarily. I dashed for my carriage. Just as the whistle blew, I saw them frantically squeezing through the closing doors of the next car down. They had made it on. The hunt was on. For the entire journey, they were my unwanted shadows. When I went to the dining car, they followed. When I used the restroom, one of them stood guard outside. They were terrified I would slip away and deny them the secret to my success. Late that night, after Sophia had fallen into a fitful sleep, Alexei crept over to my seat and shook me awake. Lena. Wake up. I need to tell you something. I opened my eyes, annoyed. If you've got something to say, spit it out. He glanced at the sleeping Sophia, then pulled a wad of bills from his pocket and shoved it into my hand. I won't let you help us for free. Here's 200 yuan. Take us with you to get stock. So Sophia had finally capitulated. She'd sold her precious introduction letter, her ticket to a stable life, to fund his delusion. I stayed silent, the money feeling dirty in my hand. He saw my hesitation and played his trump card, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Lena, after all, we were husband and wife for a whole lifetime before. We built a business together. Even if there was no love, there was at least a revolutionary bond between us, wasn't there? He looked at me with what he must have thought was poignant sincerity. Seeing you living so well now, I'm genuinely happy for you. I'm not asking for much. Just take us along to get stock. All right. I looked at the money, then at his desperate, conniving face. 200 yuan was a fortune. It was 10 months of a factory worker's wages. And a part of me, a part still raw from the betrayal, wanted to see him humbled further, to see him realize that the secret wasn't the source but the selector. I waved a hand, cutting off his pathetic speech. Fine. I'll help you this once. I tucked the bills into my inner pocket, a down payment on the suffering he had caused me. Then I crossed my arms, closed my eyes and went back to sleep. I would need my strength. The real lesson for Alexei Volkov was about to begin. The train rattled on through the night, but I slept the deep, untroubled sleep of the righteous. When I woke at dawn, Alexei was already awake, watching me with a mixture of hope and resentment. Sophia was still asleep, her head lolling against the grimy window. I ignored him, pulling out a hard-boiled egg and some bread from my bag. I ate methodically, fueling my body for the day ahead. Conserving my strength was a form of warfare he would never understand. On the third morning, the train finally wheezed into the port city. The air changed, becoming thick with salt, diesel fumes and the thrilling promise of commerce. I disembarked and moved with purpose, not looking back, knowing they would be stuck to me like burrs. The port market was a sprawling, chaotic universe of its own. I led them through the maze of warehouses and open-air stalls, my eyes scanning, my hands feeling fabrics, my mind calculating margins. I went through my usual routine, picking through stock, haggling with vendors I knew, inspecting stitching with a critical eye. They mimicked my every move but without my discernment. They saw me buy a dozen of a particular blouse and they bought 2 dozen. They saw me invest in quality wool skirts and they bought a cheaper, pilled version. Sophia on her first trip was wide-eyed. Beyond the 2 huge bags of clothing stock Alexei was now burdened with, she spent her own money on a sack of cheap trinkets, flimsy hair clips and poorly painted fans. She was playing shop while I was building an empire. The journey back was the sweetest revenge. Sophia walked ahead, carrying her small bag of trinkets, chattering excitedly. Alexei trailed behind, his shoulders bowed under the weight of 2 massive overstuffed bundles. His nice shirt, one of the last remnants of my past life subsidies, was plastered to his body with sweat. He struggled to heave the bags onto the train, his face a mask of strain. I found my seat, took out a popsicle I'd bought at the station and watched. In my past life he had always been afraid of this kind of hard work, leaving me to take these grueling trips alone. Now he was tasting every ounce of the hardship he had so casually dismissed. When he finally collapsed into the seat beside a sleeping Sophia, gasping for breath, she stirred. She opened her water bottle and drank deeply. Alexei, parched, instinctively reached for it. She drained the last drop and, still thirsty, handed him the empty bottle. "Alexei, go fill it up again," she chirped as if asking him to fetch a fan. A flash of pure, unadulterated fury crossed his eyes. It was the look of a man realizing he was the servant, not the prince. But he said nothing. He dragged himself up and shuffled down the aisle to find water. I took a slow, sweet lick of my popsicle. This was a fitting punishment. Having Sophia around to torment him was a poetic justice I hadn't even dared to dream of. Once we got off the train in our city, we parted ways without a word. I knew what was coming next. Alexei, in his arrogance, believed that acquiring the same stock was the entirety of the battle. He was woefully mistaken. Running a successful clothing store isn't just about the goods. It's about the soul you pour into it. It's about service. Alexei was too proud to engage with customers, preferring to hide in the back, counting imaginary profits. And Sophia? She was petty and easily offended, the type of woman who would rather lose a sale than suffer a perceived slight. Customers come to spend money and feel good, not to be insulted. Within days of their grand reopening in a new, smaller, shabbier storefront, the sounds of their failure echoed down the street. Not the ringing of a cash register, but the shrill pitch of Sophia's voice arguing with customers. "If you can't afford it, don't touch it. This color is not for your complexion. All sales are final. I don't care if the seam ripped." Customers who stepped into their shop, tempted by the low prices, would often turn on their heel and march straight into Lena's look, their faces flushed with indignation. My business thrived on their discord. The inevitable explosion came one afternoon. I was adjusting a mannequin when I saw Alexei standing at the entrance of their shop, his patience clearly at an end. "Sophia, for heaven's sake, can't you learn from Lena?" he hissed, gesturing toward my store, which was bustling with happy customers. "You call yourself an educated woman, but you're not even as capable as a village girl." At the mention of my name, Sophia flew into a rage. She stormed out onto the pavement, planting herself in front of him. "So that's it, Alexei. I knew there was something between you and her. Back in the village you were always tangled up. Now you're with me and you're still thinking about her." Her voice rose to a shriek, drawing stares from passers-by. "How am I not better than her? She's just some country bumpkin. What does she have that I don't? Are you blind?" She was unraveling him in public, stripping him of the last vestiges of his dignity. "And you've got the nerve to criticize how I run the shop," she continued, jabbing a finger into his chest. "You didn't even put in a cent. It was my job certificate we sold for that money. You're nothing but a kept man, Alexei. A kept man living off me." The words "kept man" hung in the air, emasculating and brutal. Alexei's face burned a deep, mortified crimson. Choking with anger, he spat back, "Sophia, I regret choosing you. What else can you do besides cause trouble? If I had stayed with Lena, I'd never have to suffer this. She's far more capable than you. She could have made me a 10,000 yuan household within a year." The sound was sharp and clear. Sophia's hand whipped across his face, leaving 5 glaring red marks on his cheek. "Then go find her," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Why are you still clinging to me?" She ran off, covering her face and sobbing theatrically, leaving Alexei standing frozen on the street, the center of a spectacle, the handprint on his face a brand of his failure. That night I was alone in my shop, taking inventory by the soft glow of a single lamp, the door half open to let in the cool evening air. The peace was shattered when Alexei suddenly barged in. He reeked of cheap alcohol, his clothes disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. "Lena," he slurred, stumbling toward me. "I regret it. I regret it all." I took a step back, my hand instinctively closing around a heavy fabric scissors on the counter. "Sophia," he moaned, "she's just a lazy shrew. A harpy. She's nothing compared to your gentleness and virtue." He was using the old, scripted lines, the ones meant to flatter and manipulate. "She's not a woman to build a life with. Lena, let's get back together. Just like in our last life. We'll run a business, make big money. This time I promise I won't make the same mistakes." He took another wobbly step closer, his breath a foul cloud. "Whether it's my money or myself, I'll give it all to you." "All right." He reached out, his fingers aiming to cup my face as if I were still his possession. A wave of pure, undiluted fury washed over me. I didn't reach for the scissors. Instead, I raised my free hand and slapped him. Hard. The crack of my palm against his cheek echoed in the quiet shop. It landed perfectly on the other cheek, a twin to Sophia's mark from the afternoon. He staggered back, more from shock than force. He lifted his head, and in the dim light, I could see the 2 glaring handprints, a perfect, shameful set. "Lena," he whispered, staring at me with what he thought was deep, tragic affection. "If hitting me makes you feel better, then hit me harder. I'm not afraid of pain." My stomach churned. The performance was nauseating. He was still trying to play the romantic lead in a tragedy of his own making. Realizing he was too drunk to comprehend reason, I did the only sensible thing. I grabbed the glass of water I kept on my desk and splashed it directly into his face. He sputtered, gasping, the water mingling with the sweat and alcohol on his skin. "Alexei," I said, my voice cold and sharp as ice. "I have made myself perfectly clear. There is no future for us. I will never ever marry you. You want to take advantage of everything? Didn't I suffer enough in my last life being deceived by you? This time I just want to stay as far away from you as possible. I don't want anything to do with you." But it was as if he couldn't understand human speech. The water seemed to have only fueled his self-pity. "I know you're still angry," he persisted stubbornly. "You're just jealous that I chose Sophia this time, aren't you? Don't worry. I don't like her anymore." He lingered, slumping against a clothing rack, refusing to leave. His presence was a pollution in my clean, well-ordered space. With no other choice, I walked to the public telephone at the end of the street and called the police. They arrived quickly, 2 stern-faced officers. I explained that a drunken man was trespassing and refusing to leave my place of business. They hauled a protesting, pathetic Alexei away, his promises of love turning into slurred curses. The next morning I heard from Uncle Feng at the noodle shop that Sophia had gone to bail him out, and the two of them had gotten into a screaming match right there in the police station, hurling accusations and recriminations. Not long after, the sign for their failed boutique was taken down, replaced by one for a breakfast shop. I didn't know where they went and I couldn't care less. A strange, profound peace settled over me. The ghosts of my past had been exorcised, not by my revenge but by their own miserable choices. I threw myself fully into my business. Within a year I had opened 2 more branches of Lena's Look in different parts of the city. Kira, the shy girl I had hired, had blossomed into a capable and fierce manager, running my original store with an efficiency that rivaled my own. The following year I was approached by investors. After careful vetting, I partnered with a serious, forward-thinking man to open a small clothing factory, establishing my own brand and building the foundations of a true enterprise. I was no longer just a shopkeeper. I was an entrepreneur. It was around this time that I received a letter. It was from the chief of my old village. He wrote that they'd heard of my success and were proud of me. He hoped that I, as a daughter of the village, might consider investing in its development. A complex mix of emotions swirled within me: nostalgia, bitterness, and a quiet sense of closure. I decided to return. It was time to face the past on my own terms, from a position of unassailable strength. The black car I'd hired kicked up a plume of dust as it navigated the familiar rutted road into the village. The place was both unchanged and utterly different. The same worn houses, the same sprawling fields, but seen now through the eyes of a woman who had built her own fortune, it felt smaller, quieter. A contained world I had successfully escaped. As the car rolled to a stop near the village square, I was met with a surprising sight. The place was decked with faded red ribbons, and villagers in their best clothes were milling about, chatting excitedly. A wedding. The village chief, older and more stooped but with the same kind eyes, hurried over, beaming. "Lena, you came. And just in time for the celebration." "A celebration?" I asked, stepping out and smoothing down my tailored city dress, a stark contrast to the simple, patched clothes of my past. Yes. "A happy day," he said, though his smile seemed a little strained. "It's Alexei Volkov and Sofia Ivanova. They're finally making it official." A laugh, dry and humorless, caught in my throat. Of course. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. At the chief's warm, almost pleading invitation, I joined the stream of villagers heading toward the festivities. I would attend the wedding of the 2 people who had destroyed my first life. The ceremony was a shabby, joyless affair. Sophia wore a second-hand dress that was slightly too big. Alexei stood beside her, a bitter smile plastered on his face that never reached his eyes. He looked tired, weathered, a shell of the arrogant young man I'd once loved. The entire event hummed with a tense, gossipy energy rather than one of celebration. The village chief, sitting beside me at the banquet, let out a heavy sigh as he watched the unhappy couple make their rounds. "A pity," he murmured to me sotto voce. After they failed in the city, one of the other educated youths got Alexei a job here, a manual laborer's position. He came back with his tail between his legs. Sophia, she laced at her parents' home for half a year. When they found out she'd secretly sold her job introduction letter, they were furious. Threw her out. With nowhere to go, she clung to Alexei. He took a sip of his bitter rice wine. I don't think he wanted to marry her. But she tricked him one night, got him drunk, then made a huge scene at the village government office, crying about her ruined reputation. He had no choice after that. No choice at all. When the miserable banquet finally wound down, I walked up to the newlyweds. I personally pressed a red envelope of gift money into Alexei's hand. His fingers were calloused and rough. His eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a desperate, hopeless emotion. "Lena," he began, his voice low and rushed. "I was forced. You have to believe me. All of this, is a prison." I raised a hand, cutting him off cleanly. "Alexei, you're already married to Sophia. Just live well with her." I held his gaze, my own steady and devoid of the pity he so clearly craved. "The past is the past." He froze, the hope in his eyes extinguished. I gave him a small final nod, then turned and walked back to my car. As the engine purred to life and I pulled away, dust rising in a cloud behind me, I glanced in the rearview mirror. I didn't see Alexei. I saw Sophia standing apart from the crowd, her beautiful face contorted into a mask of pure, undiluted hatred, her eyes fixed on my departing car. That night I stayed in my old, cleaned-out family home. The silence was profound, filled with the ghosts of my parents and the ghost of the girl I used to be. I was on the verge of falling asleep, lulled by the familiar sounds of the countryside, when the door was suddenly kicked in with a splintering crash. A man I vaguely recognized as a local layabout stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and aggression. His face was twisted into a lecherous grin under the pale moonlight streaming through the window. "Little lady," he slurred, lurching toward my bed. "What's the point of making so much money all by yourself? Must be lonely. Why don't you just give in to me? I'll take you home as my wife." My heart hammered against my ribs, but my mind was preternaturally calm. This was no random break-in. As he threw himself on top of me, his weight crushing, his hands fumbling, I didn't scream. My fingers closed around the heavy ceramic water glass on my bedside table. With all the strength born of a lifetime of rage and a will to survive, I smashed it hard against the side of his head. "Prick!" he screamed, collapsing off me and onto the floor, clutching his skull as blood poured freely between his fingers. "Damn woman! How could you hit so hard?" The commotion was deafening in the quiet night. Within minutes, the neighbors and the village officials, led by the chief, came rushing in, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. Faced with the scene and the crowd of witnesses, the man instantly broke down, sobbing and confessing. It was Sophia Volkova. He gave me 10 yuan. She said if I ruined the city woman's reputation, she'd have to marry me, and then all her property would be mine in the future. A collective gasp went through the room. The village chief's face turned purple with fury. He was terrified I would withdraw my promised investment. He turned to Sophia, who had been drawn by the noise and was standing in the doorway, her face pale. "Sophia, hurry up and apologize to Lena this instant." But Sophia suddenly lost her mind. She screamed, her voice shrill and unhinged. "Why should I apologize? She's the one seducing men everywhere. How could a woman earn so much money? She must be doing something shameful. If I were you, I wouldn't take her dirty investment. How can you sleep at night with that kind of money?" The chief exploded. He stepped forward and kicked a hard wooden stool near him, sending it clattering against the wall. "You've gone mad." Just then Alexei arrived, his face ashen. He didn't look at me. He simply grabbed Sophia's arm and dragged her, still screaming and crying, away into the night. The chief turned to me, his expression one of deep, profound regret. "Boss Lena, we are so ashamed. We will make sure you get a satisfactory explanation for this." I waved my hand, the adrenaline finally beginning to recede, leaving me tired but clear-headed. "Just handle it according to the rules, chief," I said, my voice even. "Don't worry. The investment will still go ahead as agreed in the contract." My generosity wasn't entirely altruistic. It was a power move. It showed them that the pettiness of a Sophia, the schemes of an Alexei, were nothing more than gnats to be swatted away. They could not touch me. The next morning I left the village for good. As my car pulled away, I didn't look back. The final thread to my old life had been severed, not with a whimper, but with the shattered pieces of a ceramic cup and the screams of a defeated woman. The following 20 years were a whirlwind of growth and prosperity. The nation's economy exploded, and with the foresight of my past life, I was perfectly positioned to ride the wave. I expanded my clothing brand, invested in real estate in burgeoning city centers, and even put capital into a fledgling tech company. I had long ago surpassed the 10,000 yuan household benchmark, achieving a level of financial freedom my past self could never have conceived. My life was filled with the busy hum of my factories, the strategic discussions with my partners, a team of sharp, ambitious people who respected me as their leader, and the quiet satisfaction of building something that was entirely my own. One day, a group of villagers visiting the city brought me a crate of local specialties, dried mushrooms and honey from the woods near my old home. We sat for tea in my spacious office, and as we chatted, the conversation inevitably turned to the old crowd. "And Alexei? Sophia?" I asked, not out of lingering feeling, but with the detached curiosity one might have for a long-finished story. The visitors exchanged a glance. "Ah, them," one of the women said, shaking her head. A tragedy. They fought constantly. Fists sometimes. It was said Sophia suffered several miscarriages from the beatings 4 or 5 times. Eventually she had to have surgery. Her uterus removed. The words landed with a chilling weight. Several miscarriages. Uterus removed. The other man chimed in, his voice grim. Just last month she was diagnosed with cancer. Stomach, I think. But Alexei, he failed in every little venture he tried. Buying and selling always a loss. Accumulated heavy debts. He has no money for her treatment. He just leaves her at home to fend for herself. I fell silent for a long time, the taste of my expensive tea turning to ash in my mouth. The symmetry was horrifying. Wasn't this exactly the fate I had suffered in my past life? A cancer diagnosis, no money for treatment, abandoned to die? Destiny hadn't changed at all. It had simply shifted its gaze, finding a new vessel for its cruelty. The conclusion was inescapable. Whoever tied their life to Alexei Volkov was doomed to misery. Months later, I was in the back of my car heading to the airport for an overseas investment meeting. As we slowed at a busy intersection, my eyes caught on a commotion. A middle-aged man, his clothes shabby and his face lined with bitterness, was shouting at a security guard outside a luxury hotel. "You lousy guard. What's so great about you?" the man raved, his voice cracking with impotent rage. "In my past life I was the boss of a listed company. I had cars, factories. You're nothing." As the light changed and my car began to pull away, the man turned his head. It was Alexei. His eyes were hollow, burning with the reflected glory of a life he had lived only in his delusions. I pressed a button and the tinted window slid up, silencing his ravings, shutting him out of my world for the final time. Alexei, who once thought himself the center of my universe, had been reduced to this. A bitter specter haunting the edges of a prosperity he could never grasp. Sophia, who schemed so ruthlessly to have him, had reaped the poisoned harvest of her choices. Their downfall was not my revenge. I had simply stepped off the track they were on. Their ruin was the inevitable result of the small, selfish and entitled lives they had chosen to live. As for me, I had businesses spanning cities, trusted partners by my side, and a legacy I had built with my own hands. But more than the money, the factories, or the properties, I had freedom. The freedom to live without fear, without compromise, without anyone ever taking advantage of my kindness again. That night, as my plane soared above the clouds, climbing into a sky full of stars, I closed my eyes and let the steady hum of the engines calm my spirit. My past life had ended in a cold, lonely hospital room full of regret. But this life, this hard-won, beautiful life, was my own to write. I had written it in ledgers and contracts, in the smiles of my employees, and in the unshakable peace in my own heart. With a faint, final smile, I whispered into the hushed cabin, the words a seal on my victory. "Lena, you finally set yourself free." The end.